So I want to shift now and talk about the gifts of chaos and death in an evolving cosmos. What does our best evidential understanding of the nature of reality, our best collective intelligence, say about chaos and death in an evolving cosmos? Now, Connie spends an hour and 20 minutes on a program called Death Through Deep Time Eyes on our Celebrating Evolution DVD. I'm just going to zip through this in about 7 minutes here. What she does is she takes a look at the major sciences that have anything to do with death: paleontology and evolutionary biology, embryology, cell biology and ecology, astronomy and astrophysics, geology, and geography and math, and shows how some of the major discoveries in each of these areas have helped us come to an understanding that there's not only nothing wrong with death, that there's something profoundly right with death from an evolutionary perspective. There would be no complex life on planet Earth beyond pond scum if it weren't for the death not just of individuals but of entire species. And we've only known this for 200 years. If it weren't for the death of plants and animals, there would be no food. If it weren't for the death of fetal cells in the embryonic stage of development, we'd all be spheres. I mean, mountains die, continents die, oceans die. Looking at the last one, geography and math, once we circumnavigated the globe, that's once we had empirical proof that the world was finite, not infinite. You combine an understanding of a finite world with an understanding of population, and you realize very quickly, if you want a world of children, you have to have the death of elders. Because think about it. In a finite world, if all you got is birth with no death, very quickly you're wall-to-wall people, wall-to-wall skunks, wall-to-wall bacteria, 60 feet deep. It doesn't take very long. Now, my favorite is the astronomy and astrophysics. The fact that we are made of stardust. If it weren't for the death of stars, supernovas and red giants specifically, there would be no periodic table of elements. There would be no planets. There would be no life. And we only began to understand this in 1957. One of the most important papers that was written in the 20th century was written by Fred Hoyle and several others. And what they did was they figured out where the chemical elements came from, how they were forged. At the very beginning, what scientists call the Big Bang, what Connie and I call the Great Radiance, hydrogen and helium were formed. Roughly 75% hydrogen, 25% helium. In fact, that's what stars are. Stars are a whole bunch of hydrogen gas becoming helium, and that's what powers a star. Inside red giant stars, carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen are formed. In fact, our star, at the end of its life, in its dying phase, in its red giant phase, it's large enough to create carbon, but it's not quite large enough to create nitrogen and oxygen. Inside blue-white stars that have a supernova explosion, all the other elements in the periodic table of elements are formed. In fact, if you have any gold or silver or copper, if you're wearing any metals, those metals are formed at the instant of a collapsed supernova star. And we don't believe this, we know this. This is what all the astrophysicists and scientists in the world, there's no debate on this. Death is natural, to use day language, death is natural and generative at all levels of reality. And to say it in night language, death is no less sacred than life. Or in Christian night language, you could say Good Fridays are consistently followed by Easter Sundays. Until we grasp that death plays a vital and necessary role in an evolving cosmos, Christianity will continue to be shackled by unnatural, otherworldly notions of the gospel. Medical technologies will continue to prolong physical and emotional suffering and provoke family discord. And the medical industry will continue to underwrite the widening gap between the rich and the poor. Few things are more important than transforming how we view death. Now, those of you that have seen me speak before, you know I've got this 15-foot set of beads. I call my great story beads or my cosmic rosary. Each bead signifies some significant event in the universe story, and I have the major catastrophes, the major violent, chaotic, destructive episodes, because one of the things that we know now, and I say know rather than believe, is that the primary thing that has catalyzed and furthered the process of creativity and transformation for billions of years has been chaos, breakdowns, and bad news. Understanding this, understanding that chaos and breakdowns and bad news, understanding that catastrophes have a creative role, that builds my faith, it builds my trust. Not faith as beliefs, but faith as trust. I trust the chaos of my life, I trust the bad news, I trust the chaos of our culture and our times and what our species is likely to deal with in the next 50 years. I'm not overwhelmed with the bad news, in other words, it builds my faith. And again, this isn't something that's just an abstract or academic thing. I just went through, these pictures here are of me 5 months ago. I had my head shaved because I underwent 6 rounds of chemotherapy, and I had my spleen removed. And even when I was looking at the very real possibility that I could die really soon, at one point, for a period of about a month, I thought I could die very, very soon. I was filled with gratitude and trust, completely. And that trust and gratitude didn't come because I had otherworldly beliefs that inspired me. It came from a naturalized understanding of the evolutionary role of chaos and death. So we took a quick look at a deep time appreciation of human nature, the fact that we're meaning makers, we're empathic by nature, and that we have mismatched instincts. We saw the creative role of chaos and death. Let's take a quick look at the trajectory of big history. It's what I call nested emergence. Nested, like the nesting dolls, one of the truths that we understand through science, through an evidential understanding, is the nested nature of creativity. Subatomic particles are within atoms, within molecules, within cells, within organisms, within planets, within galaxies. Is at every nested level, each level can create. Stars create the periodic table of elements. But molecules in community are also creative. Hydrogen, oxygen come together, water's created. So creativity exists at all nested levels. Now here in this picture, I've got these nested dolls separated out, but in reality, they're all nested inside of each other. And we're part of it. We're an expression of the universe, so we can't step outside the whole to examine it, which is why we need to use analogies and metaphors to describe the nature of ultimacy, or the nature of the whole of reality. Now the nested emergence part speaks to the fact that greater complexity and interdependence and cooperation keep emerging naturally over time. We see greater complexity, greater interdependence, and greater cooperation emerging both in the pre-human world and in the human world. And this direction, this trajectory is not controversial. There's no debate about this in the scientific community. There's no scientist in the world that I know of that would say that theocracies came before ethnic tribes, or mammals came before nucleated cells, or before simple cells. This trajectory is not in doubt. But this is not teleology. This is not saying that there's some intelligence outside the system that has pre-programmed it or is manipulating it and making it go this way. That's not what the evidence suggests. What the evidence suggests is that from the perspective of now looking back, we in fact see greater complexity, greater interdependence, and greater cooperation at larger and wider scale. And we have some clear understanding now of the mechanisms, how that occurs. Human cooperation once existed only within small family groups. Cooperative organizations expanded to produce multifamily bands, then tribes, then agricultural villages, cities, and empires, then nation states. And now some forms of economic and social cooperation span the globe. Now, when we understand how this has occurred, that is the mechanisms of this, we can begin to have some real confidence, some real excitement for how to move forward in a healthy, sustainable way. For example, formerly independent, or in some cases even competitive entities, face some crisis, some challenge, some chaos, some difficulty, and they figure out or stumble into the awareness that they can survive together better than they can independently. And when they've been able to align the self-interest of the parts with the well-being of the whole, that's the key, the aligning of self-interest at multiple levels, the self-interest of the parts and the well-being of the whole, a new level of complexity emerges. So now let's call these tribes. Before there was families and clans. Now you got a bunch of tribes interacting. They face some crisis, some challenge, some chaos, some difficulty. They figure out how to align the self-interest of each tribe with a new level of complexity, and a chiefdom or a kingdom emerges. Now you got a bunch of chiefdoms and kingdoms, and so on. This is how the world has become as complex as it is. This is how prokaryotic bacteria created the eukaryotic cell. This is how eukaryotic cells created multicellularity. This is how we've gone from cooperating among families and clans to now we cooperate at the scale of a planet. I love this quote from John Stewart. As evolution proceeds, living things will increasingly coordinate their actions for the benefit of the group because it will be in their self-interest to do so. Cooperators will inherit the earth and eventually the universe. And I'd put this as one of the top 10 books I've ever read in my life, John Stewart's book, Evolution's Arrow. If you just put Evolution's Arrow in Google, you'll get John's page. You can download the entire thing as a free PDF download, or you can get it from Amazon. Until we recognize our common creation story as Scripture, and what I mean by Scripture is dependable guidance, and create laws and incentives that align the self-interests of people and organizations with the well-being of the body of life as a whole, that is our planet's self-interest, we will continue to toxify the air, water, and soil, drive other species to extinction, and be hounded by religious, political, social, and economic crises. As I see it, nothing is more important than aligning the natural self-interest of individuals, corporations, and nation-states with the well-being of the planet as a whole, so that individuals, corporations, and nations that do well to the larger common good benefit. And the more good they do, the more they benefit. So they're incentivized to do as much good as possible. And individuals, corporations, and nation-states that disregard or harm the common good are taxed or penalized, or there's moral strictures, so that it's in their self-interest to do the right, just, ecological thing, and it's also in their self-interest to not do the unjust, unecological thing. If we do this one well, almost everything else will follow naturally. But if we fail to do this, almost all the other good that we do will not be enough. It's that important. See, because what this does is it makes it so that the cheaper, easier, more convenient thing to do becomes the right thing to do. Right now, the cheaper, easier, more convenient thing to do is usually the wrong thing to do, because we've not yet aligned self-interest in the well-being of the whole. See, Earth is our larger body. It's our larger self. When you look at how recently we emerged out of the body of life, or to use religious language, how recently we were created, right? In fact, if you put the whole history of the universe on the scale of 13.7 billion year history of the universe on a scale of 100 years, humans emerged on the last day of a 100-year process. 99 years, 364 days, the very last day of a 100-year process is when God created us, or when we emerged out of the body of life, whether you use religious or secular language to talk about it. So from this perspective, this picture here isn't really a picture of a human being looking at the earth. I mean, that's one way of talking about it. But a more accurate way of talking about this picture is that this is one of the first times that Earth became complex enough that a piece of itself could get off of itself and look back at itself. This is Earth looking in the mirror. In fact, Joanna Macy is one of my sheroes. Joanna Macy's got this great quote. She says, "This shift, the shift from seeing ourselves as separate creatures that walk around on Earth in a universe, to seeing ourselves as a mode of being of Earth, an expression of the universe." She said, "This shift is essential to our survival precisely because it can serve in lieu of morality and because moralizing is so ineffective." She says, "Sermons seldom hinder us from pursuing our self-interest." I mean, as a preacher, I'm here to tell you, I can preach till I'm blue in the face and people are going to do what's in their own perceived self-interest regardless of whatever I preach. So what Joanna Macy says is we need to be a little more enlightened about what our self-interest is. For example, it would never occur to me to say, don't cut off your leg. No, really, don't cut off your leg, because your leg's a part of you and you know it. Joanna Macy says, so are the trees in the Amazon basin. They're our external lungs. And that's what we're waking up to, is that we are our world. And what we do to our world, we do to our larger body, we do to our larger self. Now, of course, what this does is it begs the question, if we're part of a larger body of life, what's our role? Is our role simply to be good consumers? I had a medical doctor one time tell me that a cancer cell is a normal cell that becomes, for a variety of reasons, disconnected or out of touch with its genetic memory. It loses the guidance, the genetic guidance for how to live in a cooperative, harmonious way with the rest of the body. And if the cancer cell thinks it's separate from the body, it starts to consume the body of which it's a part. And of course, if cancer consumes enough of the body, it'll kill the body, but it kills itself. And then he asked the question, he said, don't we call our society a consumer society? What does to consume mean? It means to eat up. Why are we eating up the planet? Is it because we're bad, rotten, evil, crummy, sinful people? Or is it because, like the cancer cell, we thought we were separate from it? We thought our true home was somewhere else after we died. We didn't know that we were the earth becoming conscious of itself, that we are nature becoming aware of itself, that we are the result of 14 billion years of cosmic creativity and now achieving the degree of complexity that the universe can begin to contemplate its own nature. And that's who we are. And when with that understanding, it's like reconnecting to billions of years of wisdom. It's like we begin to become not a cancer-like agent in the body of life, but rather an immune system. If we are to have a sustainable future, if we are to have a viable future within the body of life, it's because we will have become an immune system where we protect and foster and defend the health and the well-being of the larger body of life of which we're a part. And this isn't some pipe dream. Within the next 30 to 50 years, humans, for example, will have the technology to be able to deflect any incoming intruders, major asteroids and that sort of thing, which were the things that completely wiped out sometimes 70, 80, 90% of the species on Earth. That's humans becoming an immune system. And I believe that is our destiny. That is our role. And in my experience, this is a vision that young people can get behind. This can excite them. Because as an environmental activist, my message used to be, we're going to hell in a handbasket. We better get our shit together quick or the whole thing's going down. And I don't know about you, but I don't find that inspiring, nor do most young people. See, in my experience, young people are craving a vision of what they and their generation can do that's heroic, that's inspiring, that wakes them up, fired up to co-create a healthy, sustainable future. And this vision of humans becoming like an immune system in the body of life, that's a vision that works for most young people in my experience. Now, here's the other theological thing that I'm saying, and some of these slides I don't even bother doing when I'm doing secular audiences, but I always do these when I'm doing religious audiences. That nested emergence ends the theist-atheist debate. It completely dissolves it, because theism and atheism are both belief-based concepts. In fact, theism and atheism as concepts came into being long before we had any understanding of evolutionary emergence. A nested view of reality transcends belief or disbelief. I mean, can you imagine how bizarre it would be if somebody came up to you and said, excuse me, do you believe in the universe? Or do you believe in life? It's like, it doesn't matter whether we believe in the universe or whether we believe in life. We're an expression of life. We're part of the universe. Now, what somebody says about life, now that is believable or not. I mean, somebody can say, life is so kind and wonderful. Somebody else says, life sucks, it's terrible. Well, that's believable or not, depending upon your experience and your interpretation, your worldview. But the fact of life just is. I mean, it doesn't matter whether we believe in reality or not. Reality is something that every plant, every animal, and every human being cannot not experience, inwardly and outwardly. That's why I love this quote from Philip K. Dick. He says, reality is that which when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away. Those of us who choose to use God language, that is what we're pointing to. We're pointing to reality. God is a proper name, a sacred name. God is a mythic, proper name for reality. It's meaningful night language. Said another way, God is a personification, not a person. And there's a mountain of evidence that this is the case, that all gods and goddesses around the world are personifications of reality. They're not persons. In fact, whether you use religious language or secular language, in fact, I'll do both. I'll show how it's legitimate to use both religious language or secular language. You can't understand how reality, or God, created complex life if you don't understand extinctions. You can't understand how God or reality created healthy soils if you don't understand glaciers. You can't understand how God or reality created the periodic table of elements or planets or life if you don't understand red giants and supernova explosions. Watch this picture. You certainly can't understand how God or reality created continents, oceans, and mountains if you don't understand plate tectonics. And see, we've only known this since 1964. The Apostle Paul didn't know this. Martin Luther didn't know this. Muhammad didn't know this. This has been revealed recently. This is what I call public revelation, not private revelation, public revelation. In other words, this is collective intelligence. We don't believe that the Atlantic Ocean is growing at the same rate our fingernails grow. We can measure it. We've got the satellites to measure it exactly, and the Pacific Ocean is shrinking at that same rate. Evidence is how reality speaks. Evidence is our main source of divine guidance today. Scientific evidence, cross-cultural evidence, historical evidence. We can't help but trivialize God without evidential deep time eyes. In other words, whatever we mean by the word God, those of us who choose to use God language, we're going to have a trivial notion of what that means without evidential deep time eyes. And we should have known this. I mean, St. Thomas Aquinas, one of the Christian church's greatest theologians, 750 years ago said this: a mistake about creation will necessarily result in a mistake about God. Now, if that's true, what it means, among other things, is the more we learn about the nature of creation, the nature of the universe, if we're not updating what we mean when we use the word God, we may have definitions and understandings of God that are so outdated they're no longer life-giving. In fact, that's precisely why some of the new atheists are promoting Bible reading so much. If you take a straightforward reading of the morality of the Old Testament, you'd be left with this conclusion: the basic moral principle is obey the Lord or die. In the New Testament, it's believe in Jesus or fry. And yet our own government defines terrorism this way: The calculated use of violence or the threat of violence to inculcate fear, intended to coerce or intimidate others in the pursuit of goals that are generally religious, political, or ideological. Now, clearly, God can't possibly be an ultimate terrorist, a cosmic terrorist. And yet if you interpret our scriptures literally, that's the conclusion that you'd be drawn to. That's one of the reasons why, for example, P.Z. Myers is the most widely read science blogger. 50, 60,000 people a day read his blog. And yet here's a direct quote. He said, "There's no surer way to make an atheist than to get them to actually read scripture." If you doubt this, just put Bible stories your parents never taught you in Google. You'll get a website called reasonworks.com, Mike Earl. Just listen to program 1, which is on the Old Testament, and program 2 on the New Testament. It was painful for me to listen to, but I promise you, you will have a very different understanding of Scripture. See, any time in the Bible, the Quran, anywhere, any of the world's scriptures or any tradition, whenever you hear a story that says God said this or God did that, what follows is always an interpretation. It's an interpretation of what some person or group of people thought or felt or wished or sensed that reality was saying or doing, and almost always as justification after the fact or to make a theological point. In other words, had CNN been there to record the moment of divine revelation on the nightly news, there would be no disembodied voice coming from the sky. There would be nothing other than what was coming out of someone's mouth or pen or whatever folks wrote with back then. And if we fail to understand this, we belittle the very notion of God and will surely miss what reality is saying and doing today. So just to recap the main points that I covered during this program, we took a look at a deep time appreciation, a deep time honoring of human nature, death, and chaos, and the trajectory of big history. And what I'm suggesting, what I'm claiming, is that when we have a clear, evidential understanding of what our best collective intelligence is about these three things, we can have an inspiring vision of the future. I believe that the 21st century will be seen historically as humanity's rite of passage. That is, our coming into adulthood or coming into maturity as a species. And we're going through two of the changes that all human beings go through in the process of maturing. We all go from where we are primarily guided by beliefs. As children, we're sponges. We take on the beliefs of whatever our trusted elders say. We're evolutionarily programmed to do that. But then as teenagers, we begin to question some of those beliefs. And as adults, if we're healthy adults, we're guided not just by what we've been told, but what maps onto our own experience and what maps onto the experience of others, including others outside our in-group. So humanity is going through that process. We're going from where we were primarily guided by beliefs to where we're becoming primarily guided by knowledge, by evidence. The other shift that we've all made is we've all gone from thinking that we were the center of the universe to realizing that's not quite the case. I mean, as children, we're the center of the universe. We're at the center of reality. But then as teenagers, again, we start questioning that. And as healthy adults, we realize that our legacy, how we will be remembered by history, will be determined on whether we're a contribution to the world, what difference we make in the lives of others, whether we're a blessing to others. And humanity is going through that. For most of human history, we thought, all different cultures thought that the world was made for us. And what we're now realizing is that we were made for the world. This picture, by the way, is taken by Connie at the bottom of Angel Falls in the Grand Canyon last June. So what is religion? Religions are maps of reality. Specifically, they're maps of what's real and what's important, how things are and which things matter, that provide for personal wholeness and social coherence. And they give people consistent access to the fundamental feeling states that humans have always needed to thrive, such as trust, gratitude, and inspiration. And for almost all of human history, the way we got these feeling states was through belief-based, mythic maps of reality. And what we now have is an evidential understanding of reality, an evidential understanding of what's real and what's important, but not at the expense of religion. That's the exciting thing. This doesn't diss or trash the religious traditions. It helps the religious traditions themselves to evolve. I believe that in the next 30 to 50 years, we will see the majority of all the world's religious believers step into not just a tolerating of an ecological and evolutionary understanding of reality, but wholeheartedly embracing it. No matter what our attempts to inform, it is our ability to inspire that will turn the tides. Now, I'm almost 6'1". Okay, these guys are tall. The guy on the left is John Mather. He's NASA's senior astrophysicist. He's the 2006 Nobel Prize winner in physics. The guy on the right is Craig Mello. He's the 2006 Nobel Prize winner in medicine and physiology. The reason that they invited me to the Library of Congress is that they were doing a program together there a few years ago in August on the origins and evolution of life in the universe. And they both had read my book, and Craig sent me an email. And he said, Michael, you got to come and get your picture taken with us here at the Library of Congress. He said, it'll be great for your book. I thought it was a grand idea. I was in Phoenix at the time. I flew from Phoenix to Washington, D.C. Here's what they said about my book. John Mather said, the universe took 13.7 billion years to produce this amazing book. I hardly recommend it. I'm telling you, as an author, it just doesn't get any better than that. Craig Mello said this, the science versus religion debate is over. A must-read for all, including scientists. Now, I don't know if this is going to get me on Oprah. It certainly hasn't yet. But you know how when you go to a movie and before the feature film, there's these movie trailers, movie clips? Here's an 80-second book trailer that we created that I want to share. So after the book trailer, I open it up for questions, and I ask a couple of my own, such as, what did you find most helpful, interesting, or inspiring in this program? And what difference would it make if more people held a deep time view of human nature, death, and the trajectory of big history? And I usually get quite a few good responses to these. So after about 15 or 20 minutes of question and answer, then I move to this slide, which is one of my favorite quotes from Carl Sagan, one of my favorite quotes from anyone. Science is at least in part informed worship. Now, many people consider Neil deGrasse Tyson to be kind of like the Carl Sagan of today. He's certainly one of the main popularizers of science. He's been on Nova and all kinds of different science programs and nature programs. Here he is with Jon Stewart on The Daily Show. Now, the interesting thing is that Neil deGrasse Tyson is the director of the Hayden Planetarium at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. And he was turned on to science at the age of 9 at the Hayden Planetarium. In this short video clip that Connie, my wife, put together, he's responding to Richard Dawkins at a 2006 Beyond Belief conference. And he uses a blend of day and night language. And many people consider this to be the highlight of my evening program, this short video clip.
So now I'm becoming a scientist. I'm in college majoring in physics. I go to graduate school, get the PhD in astrophysics. It's my life love. I've known this since I was a kid. I didn't accidentally land at the Bronx High School of Science. I knew, but I wanted to become an astrophysicist not because I chose it. In a way, the universe chose me. That first day in the Hayden Planetarium at age 9 as a kid, and I looked up and the lights dimmed and the stars came out. And I was called by the universe. I had no choice in the matter. I became a student of the universe with the ambition of one day being one of its participants in research on the frontier of cosmic discovery. And that ambition, that inculcation, stayed with me the whole time. To the point where when you become an astrophysicist, when you become a scientist at all, here's what I'm putting back to you. Because you would go on pilgrimages to mountaintops, because that's where your telescopes are. And where is the mountain? The mountain is far away from any city, because cities have lights and pollution and other things that interfere with your views. So by construct, the best telescopic observing sites are far removed from civilization. Then you get to the mountaintop. And what do you have to do next? You have to then start going nocturnal. The day is now your night, and the night is your day. And so that's part of the pilgrimage. There's the effort of the travel, and then there's the effort of flipping your schedule and going nocturnal. Then there's the telescope itself, this conduit to the cosmos. It's a physical, it's a tube. It's a conduit. And I sit there and I reflect on it. My specialty was the center of the Milky Way galaxy, 30,000 light years away. And so I have my digital detectors, I've got the telescope, it's dark, it's just me on this mountain and the universe. And I look up and I just think to myself, there are photons that have been traveling for 30,000 years. And I'm sort of snatching them from this journey and planting them into my digital detector. And then I started feeling bad for the photon, and I said maybe it wanted to continue, but I got in its way. But then I said, no, those are probably happier photons than the one that slammed into the mountainside, that will go unanalyzed and will not contribute to the depth of our understanding of the universe. But so there's not only the fact that I'm on the mountaintop, there's the knowledge and the feeling that I'm reaching out to the universe with these methods and tools of science. And then add to that the sum of 20th century knowledge about the origin of the chemical elements, something the chemist would not be able to answer without the help of the astrophysicist. You can't go to the chemist in your high school chemistry class and say, where did these elements come from? The teacher wouldn't know from within the domain of chemistry. That was informed by astrophysics. We can trace the elements. They were forged in the centers of stars, high-mass stars, that went unstable at the ends of their lives. They exploded, scattered their enriched contents across the galaxy, sprinkled into gas clouds that then collapsed and formed stars and planets and life. And so these ideas, these cosmic perspectives, this pilgrimage to the cosmos, there are people who say, this makes me feel small because I need to see the immensity of the cosmos. And I say, no, you're not thinking about it the right way. By the way, when we opened our facility, I got a letter from a psychologist. He had seen our show, which was a zoom out from Earth, and Earth just shrinks to nothingness as you go to the edge of the universe. And he wrote me a letter that says, I specialize in the psychological effects of things that make people feel insignificant. And I thought, bummer of a job. Man, is that what you do for a living? And he said, needless to say, your show was the greatest elicitor of feelings of smallness I have ever seen. Will you allow me to conduct a survey on the people who visit your show? And I thought to myself, there's something wrong here, because why does he feel small, but when I look up in the universe, I feel large? Then I realized the problem was his ego was too large to begin with. He came to the problem thinking too highly of who and what he was to begin with. Because then everything that happened in the show destabilized his self-image. Whereas I know that the molecules in my body are traceable to phenomena in the cosmos. It's quite literally true that we are stardust. In the highest exalted way one can use that phrase. There's a kinship with the cosmos that resonates deeply with New Age thinking, but I'm not apologetic about that. It's what we find. If whatever we find resonates with whoever, go ahead, take it. I want somebody to put electrodes on my head. And when I reflect on our kinship with the cosmos, when I do the calculation that shows that a 15-ton meteorite that we have in the center of the Rose Center for Earth and Space, it's an iron meteorite. When I do the calculation that shows that if you take all of the iron from the hemoglobin of the people in the tri-state area of New York City, you can recover that much iron out of their blood and realize that the iron from that meteorite and the iron from your blood has common origin in the core of a star. Tell me what part of my brain is lighting up, because that excites me. That makes me want to grab people in the street and say, have you heard this? I feel, and I use words. I bask in the majesty of the cosmos. I use words, compose sentences that sound like the sentences I hear out of people who had revelations of Jesus. I want someone to do that experiment, because the day you do, if the same centers in my brain are excited by these cosmic thoughts as to what are going on in the mind of a religious person, that's something to know. That's going to be really interesting finding. Because what that tells me as an educator is, let me offer the universe to people. And they'll start taking it in. And they'll start achieving those feelings that they had before. And I don't so much care whether they abandon previous feelings. I've got an offering that keeps growing, that keeps becoming more majestic. When the Hubble telescope was announced that we were going to cancel the Hubble telescope, the greatest outcry to not do that was not the astrophysicists. It wasn't from within NASA. It was the public. It was all over the op-ed pages and the talk shows. The public took ownership of the Hubble Space Telescope because the universe was coming into their bedroom, into their living room, onto their computer. They were a participant on the frontier of discovery. And as far as I can tell, if you let them know that it's not something that we're in the universe, but in fact, given the chemistry of it all and the nuclear physics of it all, not only are we in the universe is in us. And I don't know any deeper spiritual feeling than what that brings upon me. And I just wanted to leave you with those thoughts.
The other thing that I share is a music video called We Are All Connected. It's done by John Boswell. He's got 5 or 6 Symphony of Science music videos. And he takes scientists, leading scientists, and has them singing their words. He's able to adjust their voices so that what they actually said on television, they're able to sing here in these music videos. And millions of young people are being turned, an entire generation of young people are being turned on to an evidential science-based worldview as a result of these music videos. So I wanted to share this one with you.
We're all connected to each other biologically, to the earth chemically, to the rest of the universe atomically.
I think nature's imagination is so much greater than man's. He's never gonna let us relax.
We live in an in-between universe where things change alright, but according to patterns, rules, or as we call them, laws of nature.
I'm this guy standing on a planet. Really, I'm just a speck. Compared with a star, the planet is just another speck. To think about all of this, to think about the vast emptiness of space. Billions and billions of stars, billions and billions of specks.
The beauty of a living thing is not the atoms that go into it, but the way those atoms are put together. Cosmos is also within us. We're made of spark stuff. We are a way of the cosmos to know itself.
Across the sea of space, the stars are of Earth's sun. We have traveled this way before, and there is much to be learned.
We're all connected to each other biologically, to the earth chemically, to the rest of the universe atomically.
I find it elevating and exhilarating to discover that we live in a universe which permits the evolution of molecular machines as intricate and subtle as we.
I know that the molecules in my body are traceable to phenomena in the cosmos. That makes me want to grab people in the street and say, have you heard this?
The beauty of a living thing is not the atoms that go into it, But the way those atoms are put together. The cosmos is also within us. We're made of sparks. We are a way of the cosmos to know itself.
There's this tremendous mass of waves all over in space, which is the light bouncing around the room, going from one thing to the other, and it's all really there, really there. But you gotta stop and think about it, about the complexity to really get the pleasure. It's all really there, really there. The inconceivable nature of nature. To think about all of this, to think about the vast emptiness of space. There's billions and billions of stars, billions and billions of specks. The beauty of a living thing is not the atoms that go into it, but the way those atoms are put together. The cosmos is also within us. We're made of sparks. We are a way of the cosmos to know itself.
Across the sea of space, the stars are other suns. We have traveled this way before, and there is much to be learned.
Tell me a creation story more wondrous than that of a living cell forged from the residue of an exploded star. Tell me a story of transformation more magical than that of a fish hauling out onto land and becoming amphibian, or that of a reptile taking to the air and becoming bird, or that of a mammal slipping back into the sea and becoming whale. Surely, this science-based culture of all cultures can find meaning and cause for celebration in its very own cosmic creation story. I found that quote 13 years ago. In 1997, it was on the cover of the national membership magazine of the Unitarian Universalist Association. Somebody gave me a copy of this magazine called the UU World, and it had this quote, and I was so blown out of the water, I was so impressed with that quote, I decided I'd track down and marry the author. And that's a true story. Our main website is thegreatstory.org. It's just got tons of educational materials, such as evolutionary parables for adults and kids. There's a wealth of material for religious educators, parents, homeschooling teachers, just anybody working with kids. Connie's YouTube channel, the Neil deGrasse Tyson piece that we just watched, is there, along with many other things. Music videos. Connie has mashed a number of music videos that can be used in all kinds of different religious and non-religious settings, meditation settings. Our podcasts. We have 3 different podcasts. One of them is called America's Evolutionary Evangelist, where Connie and I just riff roughly once a week or so on whatever we're passionate about. Another one is called Inspiring Naturalism, where we interview leading scientists who are coming from a naturalistic, science-based perspective and asking them how do they get their joy, their comfort, their faith, their trust, their inspiration, these primary emotional states. Where do they get it from a natural evolutionary perspective? And then the other podcast series we have is called Evolving Faith, where I interview a number of leading theologians and ministers and others who are coming from an evolutionary perspective and asking them to share how an evolutionary science-based perspective has enriched or strengthened their faith. And our other websites, michaeldowd.org is where I have different presentations that I've done and other audio and video clips. Thankgodforevolution.com, same thing, there's all kinds of stuff there, including my blog. And then if you just put into Google best evolution resources, you'll get my page, and I've got links to all the best online resources and book resources, and all the books are hot linked to the Amazon.com pages of just the cream of the crop, the best of the best books that are related to this whole movement, and I've got them by sections. And if you'd like to help further us in this movement, the best way is that we're always looking for second homes, vacation homes where we can have writing retreats. So if you have a second home or vacation home that you don't use, or if you know you're going to be away from your home and you just need somebody to house sit or plant sit or whatever, please let us know. My email address is michael@thankgodforevolution.com. So thanks for taking the time to watch this program. I'm Michael Dowd.